I suggest that we start soon. I'll still introduce myself and the business webinars that we are conducting for those who might not know about this series of webinars. So I am Antoine Jaume. I'm a consultant in business ethics from Paris, France, and coordinating this work of Initiatives of Change Business and Economy program. In a nutshell, in each of our webinars, we try to explore the idea that business has a key responsibility for promoting and demonstrating sustainability. And that's for their own good as well as for the general planet good, let's say. So this has been a series running the whole year, and I'm glad that we can continue with Rocio today, who's calling a very early morning in Mexico, 6 o'clock. Thank you, Rocio.
Thank you.
There will be an opportunity to share a little more after she speaks. She has prepared a very professional presentation, so I won't delay too much and leave her the word, and then we can give more introductions to whatever we do, each one of us, when we discuss.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Antoine, and thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. It's a pleasure. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and then also go into the presentation. I am in Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico, but I actually lived in the United States for about 22 years, where I got my MBA, and then I had a career in finance, initially in investment banking and capital markets. And at some point, I switched over to microfinance, looking for an application of my financial background with more of a social purpose. And so I worked for a number of organizations, including Women's World Banking, which is a global network of microfinance banks and institutions, and then Pro Mujer, which is a Latin American microfinance institutions. I ran a regional bank here in Mexico that focused on microfinance. And then I went back to New York, where I had initially worked for JP Chase, and then I went back to New York working with Deutsche Bank within their social finance group, investing in social businesses in developing countries around the world, a lot in financial inclusion, renewable energies, health, education, and some housing as well. Then I came back to Mexico and initially working for a fintech company. And after having lived in the U.S. and particularly in New York, and I had actually became vegan in 2010. And in New York, it was relatively easy. I had many options, plant-based food in supermarkets and restaurants and so forth. And when I came back to Mexico, I realized that the supply here was a lot more limited. And I thought, well, what can I do, to help increase the offering of products? And I thought, well, with my financial background, it would make sense to look for a way to offer capital, to entrepreneurs and emerging businesses. And so I started thinking of offering angel investment, it's small amounts for new ventures. We did a landscape analysis of this business sector, very, very young, very new in Mexico. And we soon realized that most of these businesses needed even other types of support and inputs even before thinking about getting money. So we started thinking of ways to provide them with this support, and we put together one conference, the first Vegan Entrepreneurs Conference in Mexico, and the response was so amazing. People were just ecstatic, thrilled to have this platform to come together and learn from each other, learn from international entrepreneurs from more advanced markets as well. That we thought of creating the Association of Vegan Entrepreneurs of Mexico, which was born last year basically with the pandemic. And so we had to, like the rest of the world, pivot to a completely online version of activities. And so we've been having monthly webinars and networking meetings all online. But we're now going back to our in-person event at the end of January. Hope things hold here. Right here, we're at a rather low point in terms of the pandemic, fortunately, and we're very fortunate to have people wanting to contribute. Pioneers in the sector from the U.S. and from more advanced markets in Europe. And also some successful local entrepreneurs and experts in areas that I'm going to talk a little bit about during this presentation, like alternative proteins. So there's technologies that are coming out that are really, really mind-blowing. And so that's what I'm focusing a lot of my time on right now. We're still offering angel investment, but we're doing a lot in terms of the capacity building as well, and providing strategic information and networking opportunities. And so I'd like to also give you a bit of an overview of what's happening in the plant-based sector globally, and what types of issues are being addressed, and what type of solutions this sector is aiming to bring. So I will share my screen now, and yes. So yes, this is the title we gave the presentation: Committed to Creating a Regenerative, Conscious, and Harmonious Way of Life. Because very much the core of what we do is, well, as an association and as an angel investor, we're supporting entrepreneurs who are empowering consumers to adopt a lifestyle that is regenerative and conscious and healthy for everyone. So, there's a key question, behind what we're trying to do, and this is: how will we feed 10 billion people? According to the World Resources Institute, to adequately feed more than 9 billion people by 2050, the world must close a nearly 70% gap between the amount of food that was produced in 2006 and that needed by mid-century. So, it really takes the contribution of many. I think every solution is welcome here, and we have one of the keystone competitive advantage of alternative proteins comes from the fact that animals are rather inefficient processors of plant feed crops. If we look at two examples, for example, chickens, we need to feed chickens 9 energy calories in order to produce 1 calorie that we humans can consume. And so that's really an 11% conversion. And if we look at cows, it's even worse. We really need to feed them 25 to 30 calories in order to produce 1 calorie for human consumption. And this happens because plants and microorganisms are protein producers, while animals are really protein concentrators. So if we look at this, and we're looking at a very large and growing population, it's a rather inefficient way to feed ourselves if we really focus primarily on animal proteins. Another important aspect is that 75% of global agricultural land is used for raising and feeding livestock, and yet this only provides 1/3 of the protein supply. So if we look at the habitable land, 50% of it is used for agriculture. And of this 50%, 77% of it is used to raise food for livestock, and only 23% is used for crops for human consumption. And yet this 77% of the agricultural land only produces 33% of our food in terms of meat and dairy, while the other 67%, which are plant-based foods, are produced with 23% of this agricultural land, which, if we think of it, if we were to base our diets primarily on plant-based products, we could basically be feeding the entire population with about a third of the land that we're using for agriculture right now. And I just think it is it gives us a lot of hope to think, what would the earth look like if we could restore, 2/3 of the land that we have deforested in order to, raise food that we're feeding animals and then to feed ourselves from them. We could think of recovering vast amounts of land, habitats for wild animals, and forests and so forth. And just to focus on one particular type of food, which are burgers, not necessarily that I recommend that we eat burgers all the time. I'd rather much recommend a fresh whole food diet. But we all have our cravings now and then for comfort foods and for things that we were raised eating, right? And so if we look at burgers, there's an analysis that was done by the Good Food Institute, which is an international nonprofit that really works to support the development of alternative proteins around the world. And they're based in the US, but they're international now. And they've analyzed, they've done life cycle analysis of what the ecological impact would be of swapping plant-based burgers for a beef burger. And they've come out with these figures. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, these could be reduced. Even with the most conservative estimates, the reduction would be of at least 30%. The estimates go up to even 90%. Water use it's a very big one as well, because in every case it's above 70% in terms of the savings, 72 and up to 98% of savings in water use. Land use, anywhere from close to 50 to 99%, and water pollution also from about 50 to up to 94%. Now, another important aspect is that animal agriculture is actually a primary driver of loss of biodiversity. And there's a Chatham House report from February this year. We can see that the animal agriculture is it's a threat to 24,000 of the 28,000 species at risk of extinction. And their number one recommendation in this report, which is supported by the UN Environment Program and Compassion World Farming, their number one recommendation was that global dietary patterns need to move towards a more plant-heavy diet. And the benefits would be, to reduce the demand and pressure on the environment and land, to benefit the health of populations around the world, and help reduce the risk of pandemics as well. Another aspect that many of us are also very interested in is animal well-being. And when we look at what we do, we humans tend to farm and eat around 5 to 6 species of animals, because what is it? It's usually chicken, cows, pigs, maybe turkey, fish, and maybe sheep or some other type of animal, depending on where we are and the culture we live in. So we tend to eat a very small amount of species, while on the other end, we're endangering tens of thousands of species, by overbreeding just a small number of animals, which are actually kept in conditions that, most of them are confined for life, and many in cages without access to sun or fresh air, very overcrowded settings. Maybe many are subject to, cruel practices. And we know that, hygiene challenges posed by this condition require massive amounts of antibiotics in most cases, which, we end up consuming or end up in our water and creating antibiotic resistance. So there's also some challenges there, but I don't want to get you depressed. There's actually many good news in the horizon. Not in the horizon, actually. We're very much living them right now. And so one of them is we are definitely seeing a growing awareness among consumers of the impact of our food and lifestyle choices. It's very clear, and there is some generational aspect to it. We do see millennials and Gen Zs are very aware, are becoming more and more aware and about what they consume, and they're selective about what they consume and the impact of their consumption. While we tend to hear a lot about these generations, but when we look at other age groups, we also see an increase of consumption of product with decreased environmental impact, and with also coming from interest in health very much. So we are seeing that across the board. There's an increasing interest in being part of the solution, exercising our purchasing power. Sometimes when we think of these huge problems, climate change, global warming, and we can feel disempowered, but the reality is that as consumers, we can do a lot, by choosing where we place our euros, our dollars, our pesos, whatever it is that we're spending. It is what is I think it is what's making the difference in companies coming out with new products that are trying to address these issues. And we do have this young and booming business sector, which is empowering consumers to adopt healthy, regenerative, and conscious lifestyles. And so at the Association of Vegan Entrepreneurs of Mexico, we're very focused on this. And so our mission is to boost the growth and impact of vegan businesses in Mexico, maximizing access to their products and services by the general public. And we do this by providing networking opportunities to foster cross-learning, and offering capacity building resources, providing visibility and impact for the sector, and also strategic information. For example, we're right now conducting a market study of the plant-based sector in Mexico, because there's actually very little information about this market. We see a lot more coming out from places like the US and Europe, and there's not a lot of data in Mexico, and we're trying to fill that gap, which we think can be very useful for strategic planning and product development for these businesses. And I want to give you an idea of what the activity is in this, the plant-based food sector worldwide, because we really feel like, there's news coming out almost every day. There's so much happening, and it's very indicative of how this market is growing and what the interest of consumers is. We see news from even like unlikely players like McDonald's, which in October, the McDonald's in the UK revealed a plan to become a vegan plant-based food and drink leader. Kentucky Fried Chicken also has a very interesting story because they've come out with a series of product releases. Starting back in June 2019 in the UK, they came out with what they call an imposter burger, which sold out, selling 500% more than their average menu launches. And so then by the following January, after being bombarded with pleas to come back with the vegan burger, Kentucky Fried Chicken made the vegan chicken burger permanent across the UK. Also in January 2020, there was a test launch of plant-based nuggets in Atlanta, Georgia, which was sold out in 5 hours. And so after that, then they launched it in over 60 restaurants in southern US. And in May of that year as well, Kentucky Fried Chicken in China did a trial of nuggets, plant-based nuggets, And their pre-sale coupons for the first day sold out within 1 hour. So then they launched, the product at KFC restaurants across China. And in August of 2020, KFC Canada sold a month's worth of these sandwiches in less than a day. The plant-based chicken sandwiches in a month's worth in less than a day, and then they made it a permanent addition to their menu. And so then in September 2021, the US president of Kentucky Fried Chicken revealed the development of the plant-based option to rival the traditional trademark fried chicken, tenderloin, and strip. They came out with this green bucket for their main product. And Burger King also is coming out with like really interesting things. Their CEO said in March that meat items are going to be dropped, gradually, and that the menu will be 50% plant-based within 9 years. And they've actually had some 100% plant-based locations. Initially, one in Germany, I think, for a while, and then they came out with this picture. I believe is from, well, it is from Spain, definitely. I believe it's in Madrid. So they converted this Burger King location to 100% plant-based, at least for 1 month, and they put this huge sign on it, which I thought was really interesting, because they covered like the whole building with it, and it says "La carne es débil," which in Spanish means, they're playing with words here, because it's a saying in Spanish, "La carne es débil," it says that meat is weak, but it also means flesh is weak, which means that we humans, we're weak. We tend to give in to our cravings and to our desires. We're weak in that sense. So they're playing with the word state, saying, flesh is weak or meat is weak. And we see also interesting news, for example, from Berlin universities, who are planning to also gradually drop their offerings of meat on canteen menus for climate harm reduction, aiming for even an up to 96% drop in the meat offerings. We're also seeing a lot of activity from global companies like Nestle, recently launching their plant-based egg and shrimp, and confirming rumors that they're involved in cell-cultivated meat now, and a very recent investment in a company in California called Sundial Foods, which they produce vegan chicken with skin and bone. And there's many more news. They're coming out with like new products all the time. Other big companies, for example, like Unilever, they're also doing interesting things. The Unilever CEO back in February of this year said that the rise of plant-based is inexorable, as the vegetarian butcher grew 70% in 2020. The vegetarian butcher is a company from the Netherlands, if I remember correctly, which was bought by Unilever, and they produced plant-based meats. And the vegetarian butcher actually launched an Elephant in the Room campaign ahead of the COP26 meeting, pushing a plant-based agenda, because yes, many people feel that that food and our diet is something that has not been really addressed in these meetings, when it's it could be really a major part of the solution. So I think their campaign was very needed. I think we need a lot more focus on it, because we did receive reports about the menus still being quite heavy on meat and dairy, and which really catches attention of some people when this is a meeting to address a climate emergency. So some interesting news also in the alternative protein sector. There are many young companies doing really interesting things. Eura is a company that's based in Barcelona, in Spain, and they produced plant-based meats, and they have a really refreshing marketing. And for their launch of their sausage and chorizo products, they chose to do it at a bullfighting coliseum, which I think is like a perfect setting. They're really sending a message here they're a rather young company, and they're already in anywhere from, I think, 17 to 20 countries around the world. Another young company, this one is out of Chile, Notco. It just mid-year this year in July, they achieved unicorn status, which means that they're now worth more than $1 billion. And they have this, they use artificial intelligence to come up with the right ingredients to replicate the experience of animal products. So they have a range of products from like mayonnaise and milk and meat alternatives that they produce with this artificial intelligence. That they actually gave it a name. It's called Giuseppe. So, you know, they have very interesting investors as well, like you mentioned here, like Lewis Hamilton, Roger Federer. They already had Jeff Bezos as their investor from before as well. And Shiok Meats is a company out of Singapore. And this company does cell-based meats. They just recently unveiled their first cell-based crab meat. This is very new. This is one of the technologies that is being used to. In this case, it's producing real meat, but it's grown from cells. And Clara Foods, which recently rebranded as the Every Company, they recently launched the first vegan egg protein. It's real egg white protein produced by yeast. So they can produce a lot of this protein from yeast without having to use chickens. Let's see, and coming back to the cultivated meat, and this was a very big piece of news because Singapore is actually the first country in the world that has given regulatory approval for clean meat that doesn't come from slaughtered animals. And it was for the cultivated chicken produced by a company called Eat Just, and which already produces a vegan egg and a mayonnaise. And so this is the big news again, because it's the first country in the world that has given regulatory approval for these kinds of products, and everybody's looking into which will be the next country to do that. And so this company in particular, who got this approval, announced also by the middle of this year that they're pursuing a potential IPO to the tune of $3 billion. And I found this piece of news very interesting because JBS is the largest meat producer in the world. They're out of Brazil, but they sell globally. They are definitely, and they have been for a while, the largest meat producer in the world. And I saw a representative of theirs 2 years ago at a conference in San Francisco, and she was rather skeptical. She was saying that these products would never really take over from traditional meat. But what we've seen since then is that JBS has come out with their own plant-based line of products. They also purchased, I believe it's a European company called Vivera Foods, which, from what I've read, the third largest plant-based meat alternative producer in Europe. It was purchased by JBS, and now they invested $1 million to develop their own cultured meat initiative. So it really looks like they've come around, and they're coming seriously into this sector as well. And now, specifically about what we're seeing in Mexico, we, from among our founding members at the association, we do have some interesting companies. Harvest Foods is a company that produces plant milks and cheeses, and they use interesting ingredients like amaranth and pea protein and quinoa to make their products. Moramora is another founding member. They're a restaurant chain. They're plant-based, very whole foods, very clean, but also very delicious foods. And and with the pandemic, they've had to reinvent themselves as well. Restaurants went through a hard time, and they still operate all their locations with the restaurant chain, but they also went into retail, both brick and mortar and e-commerce retail. And we do have in Mexico, I believe, one of the largest vegan supermarket chains in the world, Mr. Tofu, also among our founding members. Last time I saw, they had about 21 stores already around the country, which I do think makes them one of the largest, like, purely plant-based supermarket chains in the world. And we do see, like, the vegan economy thriving in Mexico, thanks to consumer interest and entrepreneurship and innovation. And just to give you an idea of what the investment flow is to this sector, these figures were put together also by the Good Food Institute. And they include everything from angel investment all the way through private equity investments. There have been some IPOs in the sector. I think the most well-known probably was the Beyond Meat IPO, which received a lot of interest, and their shares went up. They came out at like $25, and a couple of days later, they went up to almost $160. It was really crazy, the interest. I mean, it was great to see that. And these are more early stage deals, again, from angel investment to private equity. And they're in the plant-based, fermentation, and cultivated meat sectors. Fermentation is another technology that is being used to produce proteins. And for example, these two companies that we see here on the right, on the top, Nature's Find and Perfect Day, they use fermentation to produce, in the case of Nature's Find, it's meat alternatives and dairy alternatives, and Perfect Day produces really a milk that like fully replicates cow milk because it contains whey protein and it contains casein, but it's all made from fermentation. So it's a technology that's receiving a lot of investment, as we can see. These figures are as of the third quarter of this year, and by the third quarter, the total investment amount had already surpassed the investment amount for last year. So by the third quarter, there had been $3.4 billion invested in companies in these three technologies offering alternative proteins. And we think that the investment and interest is only going to increase. So what we're seeing, and also in the words of the Good Food Institute, it's a new space race for the future of food is underway. And it's really exciting to see, whatever we think of different technologies and different types of products, maybe not all products are for everyone, but there's this whole range of innovation, people looking to provide solutions and better options. And it's all being done really for humanity, for the animals, for the earth, because it's really inspiring to see all these different efforts trying to contribute again for humanity to find a more regenerative and harmonious way of life, mostly on how to feed ourselves. But the truth is that we're also seeing companies in other areas, like fashion and cosmetics and personal care products and other types of services, in looking to offer a whole lifestyle that is, again, in healthier and in much better balance with the earth. So, well, this is what I had to share with you, and this is our webpage for the Association of Vegan Entrepreneurs, in case you ever want to check it out. We do have monthly events. They're in Spanish because it's mostly focused for Mexican entrepreneurs, but we're open to anyone who's interested in these topics. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rocio. It does I think it makes a lot of sense to all of us, and especially as this goes directly to change our own lifestyles and ways of life. And in initiatives of change, we are believers in changing, starting by ourselves or with ourselves, and also generating change via our own initial change, which is also the case in what you told us. So I'm sure there will be many questions, but I've seen that our numbers have risen now to about 24. So I'm keen that we have time in groups as well. So let's have a few questions for, I would say, clarifications and brief comments, and then we will move into these discussion groups before reconvening, of course, at the end to share. So who would like to raise their hands? I think Mike Smith has always the quickest at that game.
Well, thanks, Rocio. My question is, are we moving fast enough in the world towards plant-based diets? And I'm very touched that you say the UK seems to be giving some sort of lead in this. I'm thinking some of the really big consumer markets like the United States, for instance. So what is your assessment? Are we moving fast enough?
Yes, that's a very good question. It's you know, I guess those of us who are, you know, promoting this agenda, we would always like to see things move faster, but I can say that we're seeing an acceleration recently, and that gives us hope, because you know, the pace of these new product introductions, the interest from consumers, you know, there's more curiosity, there's more awareness of how we can contribute to the solutions. And you know, I think we're hoping that the pace will continue to pick up. I mean, even on the investor side, I mean, we see the amounts of money coming into these businesses. I think there's more and more awareness from the different angles that we need to pick up the speed, and we're hopeful that obviously we're hopeful that we'll get there, but we're also aware that we need to come at it from different angles. And for example, at the association, one of the things that we'd like to do is to also help the sector bring informational campaigns, educational campaigns to the public, to really empower consumers to be aware of what they're consuming, you know, reading labels, and there's you know, being aware of the ingredients, being aware of this movement towards clean labels as well, which is very important for our health and the health of the earth. So yes, I think we need to keep pushing for the pace to pick up, but we are seeing it happening, yes.
I'll take two questions in a row. That's Matthias and then Daniel, and then maybe you can answer both at the same time, and then we will divide in groups. So Matthias.
Okay, thanks. Very interesting. I just want to follow on Mike regarding the progress, and it's good to have special vegan supermarkets. We have them here in Berlin too. But how much inroads, how much do you get into the ordinary common supermarkets, so that those products like biological products are in the supermarkets, but also special vegan products are in the general supermarkets available?
Then maybe we take Daniel's questions as well. Daniel, can you tell us your question if you have your hand up?
Yeah, mine is very prosaic. First, I want to thank you, Rocio, for this presentation of the statistics. There's a lot of information out there, and it's great to have someone talented like you to present them, so that to improve my ability to make the best choices. Mine is a very prosaic question. Any veggie burgers I've tried has way too much salt, and I learned 43 years ago when I got into the long distance running movement in the U.S. that there's no nutritional need for added salt to anything. And so I hope some of these, to your experience, do you have a veggie burger that you can recommend that's not heavily salted? Thanks.
Okay, so to the question about supermarkets, we are definitely seeing a growing interest from just the regular supermarket chains, in including more of these products. I can say that as a consumer, since I moved back to Mexico in 2016, that the change is very noticeable. There used to be practically nothing back then. Then they started with like a really tiny rack of things that half of them weren't even plant-based, but they were trying. Now, you have entire aisles, and also even plant-based products alongside their their animal product analogs. And we do see like new brands coming into supermarkets all the time. And we are, as an association, we're also, trying to bring together, the supermarkets. Actually, there's actually a supermarket association, with the companies that are producing these products to accelerate that growth. But it's clear that supermarkets are including these products because consumers have started to demand them, and we do expect to continue to see that growth and more shelf space being taken up by these products. It's happening. And to the question of the veggie burgers, yes, that's a good question. And it's an issue with processed foods, I think, in general, right? So it's I wouldn't recommend that anybody eats this like every day, as like every meal. And the way I look at these foods, it's I think they're very good for for a certain craving. Every now and then we all crave to eat something like this, and they're very much of also of kind of like products for a transition. It's also a way that I look at them. But in terms of particular brands, at this point, I haven't been specifically focused on the salt content of them, so I couldn't recommend one brand in particular. But the good news is that there's new brands coming on board all the time. We as investors, we look at new companies that are starting and are trying to offer better alternatives to what's available right now, and they're trying to address some of these issues, even like less fat, yes, less salt, and trying to make cleaner labels, for their products. So hopefully, soon we'll have products that are lower in salt. I think it's a challenge for shelf life for these products as well. But there's a lot of innovation happening, so I hope that soon we'll have better options in that sense as well.